Jason Fitz, ESPN Radio, host of Spain and Fitz right here on 97.3 ESPN. There he is. If you're watching on the live stream, as many of you are, we appreciate you guys jumping in. Good comments and questions. Keep them coming throughout the show, throughout the day. And Jay Fitz, I think we got to jump right off with this because the NFL draft about 3 weeks away, and I think the Atlanta Falcons have added the intrigue. They are open for business. The draft looks like it starts at 4, so now what? What happens now, my man?
Well, and that's a great question. I mean, I've been doing all my draft studies, shameless self-promotion. I will tell you, everybody that loves the draft, the digital shows that I've hosted in the past are going to be back. Also, ESPN Radio doing some cool stuff for 3 days on the draft, so I'm going to be all over this for several days. So if you hate my draft stuff, listen for somebody else. If you love it, listen for me. But I'll tell you this. What's interesting about Atlanta is they're at a crossroads, right? You got a quarterback that's not getting any younger, so you got to figure out, but he's still very productive. So are you going to draft the future at quarterback, which may be there, or are you going to draft a prospect? I think the smart thing to do for Atlanta is to trade down to a team that's too impulsive and is going to trade up for a quarterback. The fourth best quarterback in this draft is not better than the best player at another position in this draft. And that's what's getting twisted. Like last year, I said we were undervaluing Chase Young. The year before, we were undervaluing Nick Bosa. This year, we're undervaluing Jamar Chase, Kyle Pitts, Penei Sewell. Like there are epic players that are going to be there available at 4. So Atlanta's got to decide if they're all in on Matt Ryan for the next 2-3 years, which I think they should be. They should go get themselves whatever weapon makes their team better. And man, seeing Pitts on an offense like that would be absolutely frightening, position or not.
Right. So if somebody trades up to 4, is it to get the fourth quarterback or is it to get someone that they like?
It's to get the fourth quarterback because the drop-off between fourth quarterback and fifth quarterback is pretty sizable, right? So if you're the Broncos, you're desperate at this point. You've tried every other way to find a quarterback. Maybe that's what you do. What's surprising to me, what makes this difficult to me is I think Justin Fields is clearly the second best quarterback in this draft class, and he may be sitting there at 4, which is a little bit of a weird temptation. Now you got the second best quarterback sitting at 4. Are you willing to move up for him? But I've always said, look at the 49ers. The 49ers have played chess while everybody else is playing checkers, right? They didn't jump on quarterbacks when they had other opportunities. They built the best roster they possibly could, and then they invested in a quarterback that turned out to not be the guy. Now they've got such a great roster, they can take the leverage risk. I don't mind leverage risk for quarterback. I mind leverage risk for quarterback when the rest of your roster isn't good enough, and that's where the mistake comes in for other teams that trade up.
Now, that's an interesting point. We had Mike Tannenbaum on yesterday, and he did his mock draft. In other words, who he would pick if he was drafting for that team in their spot. Now, he did say if he was San Francisco, he would not have traded up. But since they did trade up, he was willing to take Mac Jones in that spot. So that's interesting. The way that you put it, though, makes me kind of agree that, okay, we did everything else. It's like we have all these assets. We had the assets ready for when our team was ready. I kind of like the way you put it. Yesterday, I kind of agree. Like, I'm not trading 3 picks to go get Mac Jones. I'm sorry, I can't do it.
Yeah, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. But you can take that risk when the rest of your roster is good. I think where the Jets are confused in all of this is if Patrick Mahomes was the quarterback of the Jets, they still only win 6 games last year, tops, right? So you got the next Patrick Mahomes and Zach Wilson, you're still a 6-10 team at best. Like, you got to fix that whole roster, and I think that's where everything gets lost a little bit. So now they'll go back into rebuild mode at that position. So that's where it gets tricky to me. I don't love risk at quarterback in general, but I hate risk when the rest of your roster is bad.
All right, if you're Carolina at 8 and the fourth quarterback is there, you just traded for Sam Darnold, and you have Teddy Bridgewater still hanging around, do you draft that quarterback if he falls to 8?
No. I don't. Honestly, I think Sam Darnold right now, as bad as things have looked with the Jets, Sam Darnold is better than the fourth best quarterback in this draft. So you get the opportunity to try out Darnold. Yeah, you're going to have to pay too much with the 5th-year option, and then you'll have to make a real decision on him. But right now, why rush it? That's another great example. Like, you have an opportunity. I always say when you've got, and this applies to Philly, when you have a young quarterback, you want to see if they're great. You have an obligation to get that quarterback every single weapon you can possibly get him so that you can see the best of that quarterback to evaluate him. Now, Carolina traded equity to the quarterback. They don't have 5 years to figure out. They got basically 2 years to figure out life with Sam Darnold. Yeah. So that means they have to go out and get themselves the best option. And there's a real shot. If 1 through 4 is all quarterbacks, there's a real shot at 8. They could be looking at a generational player.
Well, at least 2. the 2 years they have him will be his fourth and fifth years, not his first and second. So you should find out more if he's ready in year 4 and 5 than year 1 and 2, right?
1,000%. And that's where, I love being aggressive to put other playmakers around him. Plus, I believe in Joe Brady and Matt Rule. So if you're Carolina, you got to say, hey, we brought coaches in this building that we really believe in.
All right, I want to ask you a question on that because my buddy Anthony Becht tweeted this out the other day, and I was laughing because he's right. He says, everybody just say what you said. I believe in Matt Rule, and I believe in Joe Brady. Well, then how come he couldn't get more out of, or how come they couldn't get more out of Bridgewater?
Well, I think that there's a little bit of hindsight's 2020 in that, because I remember as a Raiders fan, I went into week 1 thinking, man, the Raiders are going to kill the Panthers. They don't have any wide receivers. Guess what? That didn't really turn out to be an issue. I mean, this is the question, the age-old question we're all asking. Where was the incredible playmaker? Once Christian McCaffrey was hurt, where was the playmaker for Carolina? Like, where are their other weapons? So, yes, am I going to turn around and say that I believe Teddy Bridgewater at his best is a quarterback. So if you're going to have a quarterback, you better have great weapons around him. He was an quarterback with weapons, and they still had a moment in the season where we were all a little surprised by how competitive they were. So, yeah, I do think that there's room to grow and get better, but I don't think they necessarily didn't maximize Bridgewater. I don't think Bridgewater had any talent around it.
ESPN's Jason Fitz, Spain and Fitz, 7 o'clock tonight on 97.3 ESPN. And I know without having like the draft list like right in front of you maybe, but I mean, right after Carolina, you've got Denver, Dallas, the Giants, Philadelphia. We all know the Patriots are there at 15 thinking that they could be one. But is there anybody else that you think is in play to trade up or to draft a QB?
Yeah, that's a great question. And look, I think the Saints are still in play to try and figure out what the future of their quarterback position looks like. And so, I would not be surprised. Like there are names like Kyle Trask that are going to pop up mid-late first round. We're going to start to become infatuated with. So, the Saints come to mind definitely. I wouldn't be surprised at some point if Tampa Bay, who returns everybody on this team, looks at it and says, hey, they're much like the 49ers. We got a roster that's going to go out there and try and win the Super Bowl this year. We hit a home run in the draft last year with young talent that came in and immediately contributed. Let's help ourselves in the future at the quarterback position. So get somebody that may need a couple of years to develop. So, yeah, I think that some of the more successful teams are going to be in that market for sure.
All right. Now, a couple of years ago, it was 2017, the Eagles added LeGarrette Blount, Chris Long, Patrick Robinson. It was right about this time that year. Those three players were very key to them winning a Super Bowl. So in your mind, is there a definitive favorite, or is there a team that can get those type of signings still where we are in free agency?
There are still names that can contribute. A lot of people have talked about the secondary, for example. Like, I think that if you're a team that has a lot of youth in the secondary, Richard Sherman is a good option for the right style of defense right now to come in and say, hey, he's going to bridge the gap and he's going to show the guys what they need to do. He's going to be able to teach them tricks of the trade and be really a sideline coach. So, there are some guys, Vaccaro out of Tennessee, another safety example that I think can still come in. Not a great player, but a good player, right? So you can get some good players that are going to come into this process. I don't necessarily – I know the constant obsession, for example, with Jadeveon Clowney, but I don't have that. I think that there are, though, a couple of role players specifically at the secondary that can come in and still have impact for teams.
It's the second year in a row where you're going to be like, where's Jadeveon Clowney going to end up? I mean, that was the whole offseason last year, way past this point. When did he finally – it was like into June.
Yeah, and the problem is when you have a great pass rusher or a great defensive player, they rarely are let out of the building, right? That's part of the reason that we even question Yannick Ngakoue hitting the free agent market. Like, why have so many teams let him go? Well, if you're Jadeveon, like, good teams, not just Houston that's a dumpster fire. Like, Seattle turned around and they're like, nah, we're good. The Titans turned around and said, nah, we're good. And those are teams that could use that help. So, to me, that's a statement to the player they're seeing behind the scenes, and that's what the league knows that fans don't necessarily want to listen to.
All right, we'll switch over to the NBA real fast. By the way, Joel Embiid was pretty dominant last night, and I want to get your thoughts. You watch Embiid last night and how dominant he was. Now, he's playing the Celtics, who were just completely undermanned at that spot. Harden's now out. Durant's coming back. It seems that those three guys can never get on the court together. But in the end, will they not play enough for you to believe in them, or are they still too much Brooklyn with those three that when push comes to shove, they'll flip the switch and figure it out? Or are you watching this Embiid and this Philly team? They're playing together. They're going to get this, 20 games or so. Hopefully, they're going to add George Hill. This is going to be a very unique story, I think, these two. And then throw Milwaukee into that mix, too.
Yeah, I think Brooklyn's going to implode. And I don't know why we don't acknowledge this more. It's fun during the regular season to watch Harden do what Harden does. But in a 7-game series, when things start to go a little hairy against competition, who's getting the ball? Is it going to be Durant or is it going to be Harden? And when they go through that process, how are they going to feel about it? Like, how's the other guy going to feel about being the other guy for the first time in his career? Plus, we have recent indication. I mean, look at the Clippers last year, who played no time together. And then we got into the bubble and we were like, nah, they'll be fine. It's the Clippers. It's Kawhi. It's Paul George. And it didn't look good. Like, these guys have got to get some time on the court together. I'm beyond concerned about Brooklyn. I think there's a real opportunity and window. I don't know that we're talking enough about Philly. I don't know that we're talking enough about Milwaukee, because the beef on Milwaukee is a good one. They haven't done it in the playoffs. Until they do it in the playoffs, nobody cares. I understand it. But I'm still going to look at it and say, hey, Michael Jordan had to get through the Pistons, right? The Pistons before that had to get through the Celtics. Everybody has that wall. Like, at some point, I believe Giannis will break through that wall. So I look at Milwaukee and I look at Philly as two teams that could easily, at this point, give Brooklyn everything they can handle. Why not look at that as an option for the NBA Finals? Until I see Brooklyn actually get some rhythm together, I'm not buying.
All right. Well, out west, where the Lakers are kind of, in limbo right now because they don't have AD and they don't have LeBron, they're in the 5 spot. You've got the Utah Jazz and the Phoenix Suns as 1-2. Are either of those teams that you're willing to believe in?
I think Utah. I mean, Utah has everything you could possibly dream of. That being said, the one reason that I hold the Lakers to a different standard, I'm not backtracking here, I promise. The Lakers just did it with 2 guys in the bubble, right? So LeBron and AD, if they're healthy, are going to be better than everybody. So I'm looking at the health report and saying this goes one or two ways. LeBron and AD are healthy, in which case I'm putting the Lakers in the final. If LeBron and AD are not healthy, then I think Utah has an absolute chance. And I think we've just stopped talking about the Clippers unnecessarily. So that's a team that I think can come in and really surprise everybody. Phoenix is doing what every young team should want to do, right? They built the right way. They got the right guys in. They've done this. Like I was talking about it last night on Spain and Fitz. I find the 25 under 25 list maddening because you have great talent that's not equaling enough wins for some of these markets. Phoenix is a great opportunity. It does just feel like they're maybe a year away still. They're still young.
Yep, they are. That's an interesting team. They got Chris Paul, but he's like mapped around all these young guys. And Paul has always kind of been known as the guy who always kind of comes up short. So that NBA season, by the way, we'll leave you with this. Jake DeGrom threw 77 pitches and got yanked. He's a 2-time Cy Young Award winner. He's a 32-year-old grown man. Does the sport have a problem when the best pitcher you have in your entire game, they say, can't go more than 77?
Yes, and that's what we're going to see a lot of this year. I've talked to a couple of guys that I know that played in the bigs, and the biggest thing that they keep talking about over and over again, guys are telling me, look for restrictions, because this was such a truncated season last year, and guys are so vulnerable coming into this year to injury, and also they're just rusty. I mean, the guys that I'm talking that played the game have said repeatedly, we're going to see 6-pitcher rotations. We're going to see all sorts of different things that we're not used to, because it's the only way that guys can get ready into this season. They're not there yet. So, but is that good for the sport? No. That is not like, this is not at all what we want when we end up seeing pitcher after pitcher after pitcher coming in, and it's just a turnstile the whole way. It's tough to watch.
What are you rolling with there? Baby Yoda?
Yeah, Baby Yoda wearing a Baby Yoda with the Raiders.
The other half of the shirt, he's got the Raiders logo. That's pretty good. Jason Fitz, you'll hear him tonight. Spain and Fitz here on 97.3 ESPN. Starts at 7 o'clock. And, of course, he, like all guys, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Jay Fitz, take care, man.
You're the best. Have a great week, bud.